who has done the journey. He started Café from scratch. He has made mistakes along the way. He's gone, here are the things that suck and I wouldn't do them again. Here are things that have made my life a lot easier. So he's gone ahead and made the wheel like a personal trainer. If you're thinking of it as a personal trainer for your business, you're going to hate this guy a little bit. And he's going to say some things that make you mad, and it's going to be effective. But he painted a picture of here's the reality for that sales side. Here's the stereotype, here's the break it down. So for me, that was gold, because he truly broke through a mindset. He changed my mind. This is big.
Being new to the industry that you might not think of, and obviously having someone who's had 15 plus years experience, just know the ins and outs to it, and every detail was in some of the procedures and things that he gave us.
You gave tools as far as the merch displays and how you present your stock and how you set up your cafe. And I think that conversation with someone who's actively involved at the tippy point of the coffee industry in Australia, I think that would be relevant. So it's a range. Are you growing? Are you new? Or are you sort of plateauing? I would say those guys.
And there's still some follow-up, and I think that's been great. Just checking in. How you guys going? If you need anything, contact me. I'm here for you. And that's been nice, just knowing that that's there and it's an option. And if we get stuck, use somebody we can look to for that.
To have this information to help us grow, to help us grow up from back of a combi van making coffees to a cafe that we can truly say makes some of the best coffee in the area and stand by it.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for your patience, and thanks for logging on today. Let me just make sure that everything's behaving. Can everyone just let me know if the audio is coming through clear, and you can see my pretty face in the window as well. Just drop a small comment so I know everything's behaving, and we'll get a start. Lovely, fantastic. Okay. Well, look, thank you all for joining me this evening. For some of you, it's not evening. For some of you, it's morning. We've got people from all over Australia. I'm based in Australia myself, but we've also got some internationals logging in on, which is really great to see. I'm really excited to be able to share this webinar with you. It truly is some of the most valuable advice I could give anyone who's active in the industry currently operating a cafe, but also those that are thinking about starting a cafe. So look, I won't waste much time. We'll move straight into the nitty gritty and get the webinar up and running. Now, today's outcomes, I promise in the next 2 hours, and it'll be a 2-hour webinar, I will show you how to avoid the most fundamental mistakes which lead to close to 95% of cafes closing. So truly valuable information. If you truly listen and execute well, I will save you thousands today. Stay with me till the end. For those of you who are serious about opening a cafe, and I'll be offering you a very, very unique opportunity. And also don't stress about taking notes throughout today. Just stick with me till the end, and I'll make sure that you can download my 100-page course notes, which will include your cafe startup blueprint template. Okay, so just pay attention. I'll have all the resources that you need available right at the end for download. Now, look, I should probably start off with who I actually am. Who is this guy that thinks he's got such valuable information with regards to who succeeds and who fails in the cafe industry? Well, I myself, I've built and operated 12 cafes and run them under management. So it's safe to say I've made a fair amount of mistakes within my own business and overcome those mistakes. And it's this experience that gives me the opportunity to be able to share some of these fundamental mistakes for you to be able to avoid. I've been a franchisee, and I've also been a brand owner in multiple businesses. So if there's any one of you out there that are thinking about starting a franchise and need some advice in that area as well, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm also a state and national barista judge, and I also judge international coffee awards as well. So by way of coffee and the importance of coffee, I'm constantly learning from the world's best baristas. So the advice that I'm going to give you with regards to coffee will definitely be important when it comes to being able to provide the highest level of food and beverage offering. Now, I'm also the director of the HG Coffee School, and I train more than 2,000 students per year. So by way of teaching and trying to get the message across, I hope I'll do a great job for you today. Now, I also distribute coffee to more than 90 cafes. Now this gives me a very unique insight into the industry, for better or for worse. I'm privileged to be able to see businesses succeed, but unfortunately, I also see a lot of businesses fail. And really, that's where this webinar is initiated from. What I want to be able to share with you the most fundamental tool that you can use to ensure that if you are looking to start up a cafe, you don't fail before you even begin. For those of you out there, and I understand we've got some active cafe owners dialing into the webinar today, this advice is going to be really, really important for you as well. So hold tight. Now, on a regular basis, I save new business owners hundreds and thousands of dollars in mistakes. And you'll see this advice alone will do the same for you. I assist new business owners around Australia towards opening their first cafes. And there have been many around Australia that have relied on the advice and knowledge that I've provided them to be able to achieve their dream of opening up a cafe. So today, if you take my advice, your first cafe will not fail before it even begins. Your vision will be one that excites customers, and you'll be able to begin preparing your blueprint as early as tomorrow. Today, if you follow my advice, I could very well save you thousands of dollars. And today, if you follow my advice, I could also make you thousands of dollars in your new business. You can build a successful cafe without making the costly mistakes that others have made before you. And we're going to run through how exactly you're going to achieve that today. Now, before we get started, so that I can tailor our webinar a little today, I'd like to ask you all some very basic questions, just to give me a background of where you're from and what kind of stages you're at with regards to either operating your cafe or purchasing or setting up a cafe. So I'm going to run some really quick polls. It won't take a lot of time, but it's really going to give me a great idea of who I've got listening in today so that I can tailor some of the content to you. Now, on the side of your screens, you should see a small poll come up. And the first poll will be asking you, is this webinar the first time that you've even started thinking about owning a cafe? So if you can just take a quick moment to select an option there, that'll give me a really good idea of how many people here have been thinking about this for a while, or if it's the very first time they've started thinking about things. Okay, so I can see a lot of you have been thinking about this for some time, and I don't think you can see the poll results, but right at this moment, about 80% of people have been thinking about starting a cafe for some time. So I'll quickly mark those results down. And the next question that I want to ask everybody is, what best describes your current situation? The options here is I'm actively looking to buy a cafe. I'm in the early stages of planning to buy or set up a cafe. I've opened a cafe in the last 12 months. I'm currently running a cafe and need help. And the last option is I'm currently running a very successful cafe and am looking for an edge. Okay, I'm just going to publish that poll. And if you can select the option that best suits you, that's going to give me a great idea of who I've got listening in on this conversation this evening. Okay. So it's great to see a really good mix. We've got some really experienced cafe owners who are happy with what they're doing and they're looking for an edge. And you know what? This really is a sign of why they are where they are. Successful cafe owners are constantly looking for the edge. So welcome to the webinar. I hope to give you some really good information on even your own cafes today, something that will give you an edge. I know a lot of us are still in the early stages and some of us are even actively looking. Fantastic. The next question I'd like to ask will be, how are you currently employed? Are you currently working in the hospitality industry? Are you currently working in an unrelated industry, or are you a business owner in another industry? That'll give me an idea of what level of experience you have with cafes in general currently, and also what kind of business experience you currently have as well. Fantastic. So some of us are actively working in the cafe industry, and that's a great thing. You'll be able to relate to a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you today, and I'll be able to open your eyes to some pretty amazing resources that you've got right in front of you. Okay. And look, the last poll that I'd like for you to fill out for me is just let me know where you are currently. So I've listed some of Australia's states. And I've also got an option there if you're from overseas. If you can select some of those options there and just give me an idea of where everyone's from. Fantastic. We've got quite a few people from overseas, which is great to see. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for giving me that insight. Let's move on with the presentation now. So your very first step and the most important step towards opening a cafe, and obviously we've got some cafe owners with us right at the moment. This is going to be very relevant to the edge that you're looking for, is to study the current success stories in our industry. Now, for those of you that are working in other industries, you'll probably agree that working in the hospitality industry, that if you're wanting to open up a cafe in the hospitality industry, you have to study the current success stories. If you're working in another industry, you're probably doing that already as well. It's about keeping our eyes out and looking at what the competition's actually doing. For new cafe owners, it's really, really important that you do study the market leaders. For established cafe owners, I recommend you do this exercise every 6 months. But now you're going to say to me, Pete, well, how do we establish where the success stories lie within our industry? And that's really not an easy task to undertake in. But I'm going to suggest that we go to the same source that we look for other information, and you jump onto Google. Okay, so this is where we're going to find the market leaders, and this is where we're going to find the hospitality businesses and cafes that are getting free marketing and free promotion and free write-ups online. The easiest way to find our market leaders and our industry success stories is simply to Google top 10 cafes in your capital city. Okay, and you can do that wherever you are in the world. If you are living and considering opening up a cafe in a smaller town, I would recommend visiting one of your capital cities and doing this exercise with one of your capital cities. So if you've got a pen and paper in front of you, that will be the number one task that I'm going to ask you to do following this course. I want you to Google top 10 cafes followed by your capital city. And what's going to come up is a series of articles. Your local, your state newspaper or your national newspaper writes these articles up at least once a year. There's also bloggers and websites that write these articles up very frequently. Here in Australia, we've got Broadsheet. And we've got a handful of local papers as well. So if you were to Google top 10 cafes in Sydney, you would get a myriad of articles. Now, what we're looking for is obviously the most latest articles, And we're looking for a small variety of articles as well. We're looking for the names of the cafes that keep popping up across all of these articles. And what I'd like you to do is I want you to write down the name of the cafe, jot down the address on a piece of paper. Don't put it in an Excel spreadsheet, not unless you're definitely an Excel person. You know who you are. But if you're not an Excel person, I find writing it down on paper, it can be very empowering. When you're looking at a piece of paper on your desk, it almost forces you to take action on it, as long as you don't lose that piece of paper, of course. Now, I want you to make a list of 10 cafes that feature heavily in these articles and write-ups, okay? Write down the address, and then we want to go out and we want to study these businesses. Now, when I say study, that doesn't mean pop in and grab a coffee. That means go in there with pen and paper, have your camera ready, and I'm gonna run you through the exercise that I actually want you to undertake in. Okay. Now, what do we study in these market-leading cafes? Well, the first thing we're going to study is location. Okay. Now, I've learned the hard way as a business coach that simply telling someone where a good place to open up a cafe is really doesn't cut the mustard. It's not enough to convince someone that a particular area is the right location for their business. Okay, you need to go out and you need to see it with your own eyes. Now, if we're visiting the top 10 cafes in our city, you're going to see that these cafes generally tend to congregate into certain areas, whether it's east, west, north, south, whether they're particular precincts. This exercise is going to answer a lot of questions for you. Now, if we're studying where the market-leading cafes are being located, well, perhaps that's a clue as to whether or not you should consider moving or setting up your business in these areas should be a consideration. So where are the popular cafes located? That's what we want to find out. Are they located in central business districts? Are they located in cafe districts or commercial precincts? Are they located in industrial areas? Now, I'm seeing that pop up in some capital cities more often now. Or are they located in residential areas? When you do this exercise, you're going to know for yourself where the market-leading cafes are located. Okay, I want you to note the suburbs, the street type, the building prominence. Now, what I mean by prominence is, is this cafe located between two buildings, or do they always generally seem to be located on the corner of a street? I want you to make a note of that. It's going to be very, very important. Surrounding businesses and activities, I want you to make a note of those. Are they other cafes or are they offices? I want you to make a note of where these cafes are, because obviously the surrounding businesses are going to supply these cafes with a level of trade. And I also want you to make a note of the competition. Often we're scared of competition as new cafe owners. And doing this exercise may make you realize that perhaps you shouldn't be scared of competition, and perhaps competition does assist in building up an area and how busy that is with cafe trade. Now, when we do visit these cafes, I also want you to make a note of your initial impressions. And what do those initial impressions look like? Well, I want you to make a note of whether or not they seem modern or dated, expensive or cheap, welcoming, dirty or clean. Now, some of you are laughing now, but some of you well know that you've walked into some businesses and you do get a feeling that these businesses can be dirty. Busy or quiet? Does it look like a cafe or perhaps even a takeaway? Now, one thing I'm going to say is today I'm not going to share any words with you that aren't impactful on your potential business. Now, when I say, does it look like a cafe or perhaps a takeaway, a lot of people will start up businesses and they're indistinguishable between cafes and takeaways. It's really important that you build a business that looks like a cafe. And perhaps you'll make this observation when you're visiting the top 10 cafes. Make a note of the parking. Does the cafe have parking available, and where is the parking available? How much parking is available? I want you to make a note of that. Obviously, before we walk into the cafe, we're also going to notice the outdoor setting. Okay. And I want you to make a note of the outdoor setting. Now, here I've got some images, and these images aren't necessarily an indication of what your outdoor setting should look like, but I'm going to provide you with some images throughout this presentation just to bring to mind the things that you need to be looking out for, and just to give you some examples of what's out there. Now, here's an interesting cafe. They've got tables and chairs out. They've got an A-frame sign out, and it looks like they've got a little olive tree next to the entrance. Can you imagine what this business would look like if those tables and chairs and the A-frame sign and the little tree weren't there? Would it even look like a cafe business? These are the observations that I want you to make. Make a note of how many tables and chairs are out the front of these market-leading cafes and what they look like. Don't be scared to pull your camera out and take photos. But what I will say with regards to the photos that you do take, make sure that you take those photos off your camera or phone and save them into folders on your desktop. Now, these folders should be categorized. So you've got a folder for outdoor settings, and you'll have a folder for the other things that you're going to observe, so that when you do finish this exercise, you can have a look at the variance between all of these things that you've observed. And we're going to try and look for some trends. Are market-leading cafes doing the same thing? Is there a common thread between all of them? That's what we're kind of looking for. Here's another example of an outdoor setting. Now, this particular outdoor setting looks significantly different than the last one. Okay, so again, I would want you to take photos, make a note of how many tables and chairs are out the front. All of these are very important observations. This is one of my favorite outdoor settings, and I'll share with you why I love this outdoor setting the most. This particular cafe is in Hong Kong. And I recently had a client that actually said to me that this cafe wasn't too far from their home. But what you can see here is there's two customers in this cafe, and there's a strong probability that they're the only two customers in this cafe. But they've chosen to sit in the windowsill. They're literally hanging out of this cafe. And of course, they're able to do that because it's been engineered in this manner. A great lesson here is we really want to attract our customers to our outdoor settings and to our windows, so that even when we've only got one or two customers, it can really seem appealing to people walking past. And people walking past, to an extent, are given the opportunity to experience our business. Now, perhaps you can agree that just looking at this image, you almost are experiencing this business. And really, that's what we want for our customers. When a customer walks past our business, we want them to feel like they're walking through our business. And I think this is a great example of that. Obviously, this needs to be engineered. The window sills are quite wide, and they've re-engineered the windows so that people can sit in that space there. But that's a great example of finding a way to attract the first few customers that you have to your window or outdoor setting, so that they can act as marketing for your business rather than hiding inside the cafe and having the cafe look empty. Here's another example of outdoor settings. Now, again, I'm not necessarily saying that this is a market-leading cafe, but I do want you to see how they can be different. And when you are visiting these cafes, I want you to make these observations and notes. I want you to make some notes on the tables, chairs, any greenery and planter boxes that may exist out there, whether or not there's signage or A-frames. Make sure that you make a note of all of that. When we're looking at the windows before we enter the business, well, this is another great example of what I was talking about a little earlier. This cafe may very well only have one customer in it, but as you're walking past this business, well, it does look tempting to pop in there, doesn't it? And again, this isn't by accident. They've engineered it. They've got cushions in the window. They've put a paper there, a small little table for people to be prompted to even want to sit there. It may have even been a suggestion by a barista or the owner to take a seat over at the windowsill if they like. So that's done really, really well, I think. Here's another example of a cafe in country Victoria. Again, big wide open doors, tables. Well, they've got some stools out the front, but without the table settings visibly, well, there is a small bench out the front. But you'd probably agree that in walking past this business, it does allow you to experience it in some way. I want you to make a note of the doorways of these businesses. Okay. Is there a trend? Here we can see concertina doors that open up the business completely to the outside world. So the outside becomes inside and inside becomes outside. If that appears to be a trend amongst the market leading cafes, well, it's certainly something that you need to observe. Okay. Another example of a doorway, obviously this is quite interesting. And if you see this as a clear trend amongst the market leading cafes, well, you definitely need to take note. Here we can see a nice big doorway again. Now, when you enter the business, I want you to observe how you're greeted. Okay, that's going to be really important. I want you to make a note of what your first interaction with others as you entered the cafe. Were you met at the door? Were you smiled at? Were you greeted? Okay, that's really, really important. Restaurateurs, if we've got anyone that's working in the restaurant industry with us, you'll probably agree that most business owners in restaurants don't leave this to chance. We've become a little bit complacent in the cafe industry with this, though, and this is what I call the customer service experience. In a restaurant, the restaurateur will train their staff to greet people at the door, to seat them, to fill their glasses with water, to recite the specials, to take their orders, to return back with the meals and try to remember where everyone's meal belongs, and also to return when everyone's mouths are full and ask if they're enjoying their meal. None of those things are left to chance, and the staff have been trained in how to execute the customer service experience. So I want you to observe the customer service experience when you're visiting these top 10 cafes, and make a note. For better or for worse, you may find that some of these market leading cafes fall short when it comes to decent customer service, but there is a lesson in making a note of that observation and knowing perhaps the way we don't want to treat our customers. Okay, so please take the time to do that. Now, when we do enter the cafe as well, I want you to make a note of whether or not the cafe was warm or cold. And you'll say, well, isn't that a peculiar thing to make a note of? Well, it is and it isn't. Some cafes are freezing cold in winter, and the cafe owners don't quite understand why people aren't hanging around. And the same can be said in the warmer months. Okay, so temperature control is really, really important. Was it open space, busy or condensed? Did it feel natural or artificial? Again, dirty or clean? Organized or disorganized? Okay. With regards to counter service or table service, note how long it took to be attended to. What was said? Did they offer complimentary water and present you with a menu? Did they recite specials? Did they ask you how they can accommodate any of your particular needs? And was the product delivered to you in a timely manner? And the other thing I want you to ask about your experience when you're visiting these cafes is, what about the service may have been remarkable? It may not have been remarkable. So I want you to make a note of what could have been remarkable. What could they have said to you? How could they have behaved? What could the food have delivered? That kind of thing. Okay. Now, aesthetics. We're going to study the aesthetics. And what are aesthetics? Well, look, in basic terms, the aesthetics are the things that we see and experience around us. Okay. I want you to study the tables when you're inside. Okay. Here we've got an interesting example of a very unique table. And perhaps you could probably agree that if you were to visit this particular cafe, you'd probably take a photo of this and share it with friends. You'd put it on Instagram, you'd put it on Facebook. And this is really quite interesting, because this is what we're wanting to achieve. This is why we're emulating our success stories in our industry, because it's little things like this which will bring us customers. And can I tell you, social media in its freest form is the best form of marketing. If you can imagine a group of people came into this setting and took some photos and shared it with their friends and said, check this place out, there really is no better marketing. And really, that's what we want for our businesses. This is certainly very Instagrammable. I'm actually quite lucky. A few years back, I met up with the directors of a design company which went on to design the most Instagrammable bar in the world. I asked these two guys, what is it about your design work that leads to, you know, an award like the most Instagrammable bar? What makes a place so Instagrammable? And what they actually said to me really resonated, and it made obvious sense, perhaps in a similar vein to today's webinar. They said to me, it's the small details. We pay a lot of attention to the smaller details, right down to the napkin and the cutlery. We design everything. And really, that's what I'm advocating here. I need you all to study the minutiae of what has gone into each of these businesses. What are the little things? Because if you're looking for that one big thing that's going to make your market-leading cafe, you're not going to find it. It is all of the little things. Now, why are we studying the market-leading cafes? Well, I didn't mention this earlier, but we're studying the market-leading cafes because this is what the customers are going for right at the moment. We're going to start with what the customers want. Okay, this is what we're going to study. Where are the customers going to right at this moment? Where are the journalists writing up articles? We want to find out. Okay, and essentially, we're going to design a business based on our observations on the market-leading cafes, so that when we do build our first cafes, or if you're currently in an active cafe, you'll be able to assess how far off are you from the current market trends that our customers are talking about, are demanding. That's what we want. Okay, so it's going to be a real eye-opener. Let's move forward. Here's some more examples of chairs. I think we do have someone from Berlin joining us today, so perhaps this is a familiar setting. I don't know why, but this almost reminds me of a Parisian cafe as well. Again, I'm not advocating that this is the table. These are the tables that you should use in your cafe, but they're just examples of perhaps what you may observe. I'm certainly not a big advocate of the big sugar dispensers. Here's a great example of something that I couldn't go past by way of taking a photo. If I had an espresso just sitting there, I'd have to take a photo of the espresso next to this interesting table setting. And you can see in many instances, what you're putting together doesn't necessarily have to be ridiculously expensive. But if you're finding that things like these table settings are quite a bit of a trend, well, you can't ignore these trends. This is what the customers are wanting right at this moment. Some recycled timber here for these tables. I want you to also study the table setting. And I see these done wrong so many times, and the business owners left scratching their head as to why the customers aren't taking well to their cafe. You know, I've seen horrible things on table settings. Here are some examples of what table settings can look like. And again, it's not my style telling you right at this moment what's currently on trend. That's not my place to do. What I want you to do is get out there and find out what's on trend. What should our table settings look like? Out of these top 10 market leading cafes, are they all doing the same thing? Is something on trend right at this moment? I want you to get out there and find out. So take photos of the table settings. Here we've got a small table setting with some, they look like wildflowers and a small jar of sugar there. Here we've got some other flowers. Try to avoid plastic plants where possible. That's probably a no-no for table settings. Here we've got some settings with herbs. Herbs can be quite difficult to keep alive, strangely enough. Perhaps that's just me, but they do look lovely when they are well looked after. I want you to study the chairs. Here's a really interesting seating arrangement. You know, it almost looks like a sports stadium setup coming off the counter there. There's actually a cafe here in Australia that was recently voted the best designed cafe in Australia, and they've got a very similar bench style seating setup in their business. Obviously you're trying to encourage people to interact with your business in a certain way, and these people are potentially achieving it in this manner. Here's another example of chairs. This looks great for kids' parties, although if there's any parents out there, you'd probably disagree with me. I've got 3 of my own kids, and this could be a bit of a nightmare, but I know my kids would absolutely love this. But at the very least, if this was somewhat of a dead space, and you wanted it for novelty appeal and photography, this could work relatively well. Again, I'm not advocating that this is currently on trend, but certainly if you see something like this frequently amongst the market leading cafes, it may be something that you need to consider. Here are a few more examples of chairs. Here, again, we're clearly encouraging people to sit at the windows. This is, really quite interesting. I kind of like these. I can imagine people would take photos of these quotes on your chairs. But green bean Hessian sacks integrated into this furniture here. I'm not too sure if this is current trend. It certainly was a while back. I want you to observe the floors when you're visiting these businesses. Here's a great example of floors that haven't been taken for granted. They've polished these floors and they've asked the painter to design something on the floors as well before they put a final finish on them. So that's really quite interesting. Here we've got timber floors, but they could very well be lino as well. Now lino's come a long way, or vinyl floors have come a long way. I've actually recently put some new timber lino into my coffee school, and whenever a student comes in, it's almost inevitable. They have to bend over and scratch the floor just to see if that's real timber. This is a cafe in Melbourne, perhaps a little much for my tastes, but again, it's demonstrating that this particular cafe owner hasn't taken their floors for granted. This is actually a craft cafe, so it's probably the only instance where you could get away with something like this. Some interesting tiling. I would probably argue it's a tiler's nightmare, but it's been really well executed. That perhaps is the design coming down off the counter and down across the floor, joining up with timber work or lino. Again, floors that are tiled to match the counter. I don't want you to take the ceilings for granted either. I want you to visit these cafes and study what's on the roof. Okay. Now, here's a great example of a cafe owner that hasn't taken the ceiling for granted, and it looks like it would have potentially been a nightmare to engineer and potentially very expensive, but it's not so much the case. What you're seeing hanging from the roof there is what we call dowel timber. They're these little timber rods that are just, they're little round pieces of stick. You can buy them from the hardware. As a child, I used to use them to make kites, if you can imagine. They're relatively inexpensive, and what they've done here is they've painted them all pink and they've glued them to the ceiling. It would have taken them quite some time to do this. I've seen similar ceilings with ladles and wooden spoons and things like that. They can be very impactful. I've even seen takeaway cups stuck to the roof. Again, I'm not suggesting that this is currently on trend, but if you're observing some of these in the market-leading cafes, it may suggest to you that, look, the ceiling, you can't ignore the ceiling either. And I can say to you that this particular cafe has had an awful lot of photos taken of it and posted to social media. And really, that's what we're after in our businesses. Another example of a cafe that hasn't taken the ceilings for granted, we've got some old vintage lamps hanging off the ceiling. And again, if that matches the decor of what's currently on trend, this may very well be what you would be doing with your ceilings. I really quite like this. I should imagine it's a carpenter's nightmare, but if you've got a friend who's a carpenter and willing to help you out, you could do this relatively inexpensively. And again, it's a great feature. Here you can see some porcelain cups hanging from the ceiling. It looks like we've got some V60 coffee filters as well, with lights shining through them, and they appear to be hanging off a suspended ladder up there. I've seen this a few times, and this particular cafe is in Bucharest, but I've seen it over in Fremantle and also in Sydney as well. Now, walls are a very, very important consideration, and I absolutely want you studying the walls. What you can see here is obviously a wall, but if you look carefully, you'll see two chairs and a table. What I say to my clients often when we are talking about walls is if you can just imagine leaving a friend sitting at that table, popping off and ordering a coffee at the counter, and as you return, you see your friends sitting up alongside that wall. They're sitting at the table, but you've got that wall as a background. It's going to be pretty hard to not want to take a photo of your friend, okay? It's going to be one of those perfect portraits because the setting's just great. That's what we want to engineer for our customers. We rarely want our customers sitting up against a plain white wall. We really want to be able to give our customers every chance they can to take a photo of your cafe. And this is a really good example of that. We're going to see some other walls in a moment as we move through this. Here you can see a passage from a book. And again, can you imagine someone seated at a table right in front of that? You'd want to take a photo of your friend with this passage of text behind them. So I should imagine that wall gets a fair few photos as well. A great use of wallpaper here. For many years, I was terrified of wallpaper. Perhaps it's because I've had to remove it in the past. But wallpaper has come a long way, and you can get some amazing walls. You can get incredible stuff done. Here they've used a pretty basic wallpaper, but the interesting thing is that they've continued that onto the floor and then up onto the ceiling. It would probably be too much if it wasn't for those plants and the signage mounted on the walls. But yeah, again, it's an interesting use of wallpaper for this particular cafe. This strikes me as perhaps a dessert cafe or somewhere that goes overboard with chocolate. This is a place in Poland, and they've just engineered this timber to look like melting chocolate on the wall. Again, someone's going to take a photo of that inevitably. It's potentially not my cup of tea, but it's certainly attention grabbing. I do like this one here. This is a place in the US, in Minnesota. Urban Bean Coffee have got a beautiful coffee machine there on the counter, and they've also put their design element, which is potentially this rabbit that appears alongside their logo frequently, and their logo, Urban Bean Coffee. Now, the great thing about this is if you can imagine, people would want to take that photo of that right there. Obviously, the counter's looking a little bit messy at the moment, but if it was a little bit cleaner, that would be the money shot. Especially if a journalist was visiting this cafe, they would want to take this photo. Now, if you can imagine your cafe featuring as one of the new cafes that's opened in town, and the journalist takes that particular photo, they've got your logo up on the wall with this design element right next to it and a smiling barista or business owner behind the coffee machine. Your photo is going to feature alongside a lot of other photos of new cafes that have opened over the last year. But the difference is the photo that's been taken of your cafe actually has the name of your business there, as opposed to just a photo of latte art or something like that. Okay, so again, there's real value in putting your own branding up on your walls. This is a cafe in Sydney. This is a very old photo. I don't think their walls look like this now, and I think the chalkboard look is getting, is well and truly dated now. But certainly, if you observe that chalkboards are currently on trend, this may be what you might consider putting up on your walls. Here we've got some demi-tasse cups or espresso cups with lighting in them along the wall. Again, it's probably not my cup of tea, but people would probably take photos of this. And it's not for me to say what's fashionable and what's not, and what's currently on trend at the moment. As I've mentioned a few times, you need to get out there. And if it appears to be a trend amongst the market-leading cafes, well, we can't ignore this. Counter design. Okay, here we've got a counter, and I've included this photo here because if you look carefully, you'll be able to see the footing of the counter right underneath the order here sign, which probably suggests to me it hasn't been a counter that's been built by a carpenter or a cabinet maker. It's a makeshift counter, and I suppose it's a testament to how cheaply you can construct a counter. Obviously, their big shortcoming is they should have continued that signage all the way down to the floor. For those of you who are here in Australia, I can say to you that I've come across a lot of cafes that have built their counters simply using, and for those of you overseas, I'm sure the same thing's available in any hardware, but I've seen people pick up Bunnings workbenches. Okay, so just a workbench that you would have for your workshop at home or your shed, and they would put cladding over the front of it, very similar to this. So this could be MDF board, and you could either paint it and put signage over the top of the MDF, or you can tile it, and it looks like it's a really well engineered front counter. It's certainly, we know that it bears the weight of 800 kilograms because that's what the workbench has been rated for. And then what they will do, instead of having the standard workbench top, again, the hardware or Bunnings will actually sell you large slabs of timber that you can actually use for a countertop as well. So you can put countertops together relatively inexpensively. Now, when we're visiting these market-leading cafes, I want you to take photos of the counters, because even in a counter like this, we can see a lot of things going on. We can see where the display cabinet's located, what kind of point of sale system they have, the lighting that they've used over the top. None of this is done by accident amongst the market leading cafes, and everything has its place on these counters. So even if you're not observing certain things in it, when you come back to the photos that you've taken, you'll say, oh, that's where they've put the jars. Oh, and that's where they've located the display cabinet. And that's where the point of sale system is. And there's a gap between this and that. You're going to learn a lot just from having a look at the front counter. So please make sure that you're taking notes on the front counter. Here we've got another example. We've got Subway tiles on the front of this counter. Everything looks very streamlined and, white. I call this the clinical look. It's not a bad look. I do like it. In this image, I think it's a great design choice to put a black tile down on the floor. Here we've got a great looking counter. This looks like rusted steel. I'm sure it's just painted timber, but it's really quite clever there. And they've got their tagline or the name of their business on the front counter there. So again, you can imagine it would lend itself to some great photos. This particular front counter has been engineered with crates, to look like crates. It's really just pine sheets with timber nailed onto the front of it to make it look like crates. And they've also stamped certain design elements to give it that level of authenticity. So that's really quite clever. Again, is it currently on trend? I'm not too sure. You need to get out there and have a look at how people are engineering their counters. Pine seems to be a trend amongst my examples. Here you can see they're using pine sheeting for the fascia of this counter, and they've used some timber to create a design element on the front here, which also continues onto the ceiling as well. There's pine truly everywhere here. The serving boards are pine, the top of the counters are pine, even the splashbacks are pine here as well. Again, if that's an observation that we're making and it's currently a trend, that's perhaps what we're going to have to move with. A really simple counter design there. I want you to study the coffee machines. Okay, now you may not even know what brand of coffee machines and grinders they are. That's fine. Send me an email with your photo, and I'll tell you precisely the pros and cons of the coffee machine that you've observed that seems to be popping up frequently amongst market-leading cafes. Now, market-leading cafes will choose from a very small variety of coffee machines here in Australia, and the main reason why they do that is because certain types of coffee machines will affect the coffee in certain ways. They can absolutely change the flavor of the coffee. They can change the body of the coffee, and the same can be said about the grinders as well. And for you as a new cafe owner or a cafe owner that's not quite sure why you can't get over the hump on coffee sales, well, it may very well be the equipment that you're working with. If you don't have the right type of equipment, you may not be able to attract the right people to work for you. And if you can't attract the right people to work for you, you may very well not be able to produce the right product that you're wanting to. And certainly all of this leads to dwindling sales. So even if you're blindly observing these trends, you're going to avoid some really costly mistakes if we simply emulate what the market-leading cafes are using by way of coffee machines and grinders. Now, here we've got some very common coffee machines and grinders, and I can say to you that in some states in Australia and some capital cities, every second cafe has that machine and these grinders. They're great machines and grinders, by the way. But what this particular cafe has done is something really quite unique. They have taken, that machine normally comes in a stainless steel finish, and these grinders normally come in a matte black. What they've done is they've removed these panels from their equipment, taken them down to the local panel beater and had them spray them a brass color. And they're clearly matching the machines to the grinders, which is a really sharp look. They're differentiating themselves from the competition, which potentially have very similar equipment. And I've got a feeling this racking up here might be brass, so they're matching it to a theme within the cafe as well. So if you're observing brass as a theme within market-leading cafes, well, look, you may need to spray your equipment brass. Coffee machines come in different shapes and sizes as well. So again, observe the kinds of machines that are being used in the market-leading cafes, because it may be something that you need to consider. This machine here was used in the last few World Barista Championships. Again, if this is the machine that you're seeing around the place, you may need to look further into that. This is the San Remo Cafe Racer, one of my favorites at the moment. And this particular machine comes in, all varieties of customization. This one actually looks like a Cafe Racer, but I really like the red leather panels that they put on these machines sometimes. This is a Slayer, and you can see, again, it's a slightly different body. And of course, if you're from the United Arab Emirates and you'd like to gold plate your coffee machine, you can absolutely do that as well. So they absolutely come in many shapes and sizes, as do your grinders. And again, I want you to observe, what kind of grinders are people using? Are they matching grinders? How many grinders are up on the counter? And if you don't know the reason why there may potentially be 4 or 5 grinders on a bench, drop me an email. I'll be happy to share that information with you. Okay, but at the very least, it's an observation that you've made, and perhaps you may need to emulate that if you're trying to emulate success. What I will say about grinders, obviously they come in different shapes and sizes, but a grinder can also change the taste of your coffee. Here they've got some boards out right in front of the grinders, just advertising the different varieties of coffees that they have on offer at the moment. This looks like it could be paired with the Cafe Racer coffee machine that we saw a little bit earlier. But again, that's an example of custom paint that's been put onto this particular grinder. Okay, I do like matching grinders. Now, crockery should be another observation that you make. I recently went to a cafe, and I've probably told 20 people about this. It was a stunning experience for me. I sat down and they brought my coffee out, and the coffee came out in a cup that was made out of terracotta. Now, for those of you that have worked with clay before, and some of you haven't, terracotta, until you smooth it as a clay, it can be quite rough like sandpaper. And the outside of this cup felt rough like sandpaper. So it was really quite an experience to just simply hold the cup. The top of the cup over the lip and on the inside had a smooth glaze on it. But since that time that I got to hold this beautiful cup, I've shared the details of this cafe and their crockery with many people. So getting your crockery right can be very, very important. Here are some different examples of crockery. And again, I'm not advocating that this is potentially on trend, but I do want you to see that there is a large variety of crockery available. Often, as new cafe owners, we'll go to a cafe supply store and we'll look at the crockery and go, yes, we want black cups, and just pick up black cups. Okay, that's not really choosing your crockery. That's not taking the time to engineer your crockery for a customer experience that you want. I call that settling. Another example of settling on crockery is speaking with your coffee supplier who perhaps offers you free crockery. Okay, and at that point, you're likely to end up with the same crockery as 90% of the cafes in your city. Why would you want to do that at a point where current trends are moving in a completely different direction. So, even accepting something that is free can be very detrimental to your business, and you could miss out on a fair amount of free publicity. I love this picture here. This is a picture of an affogato. An affogato is ice cream with coffee. You can imagine ordering this perhaps in a cafe, and how could you not take a photo of this? I drink coffee everywhere, and I've had many experiences in cafes, but even I would say to you, I would take a photo of this particular experience and send it to my wife. Look what I'm doing and what you're not doing right at this moment. And many people would put that on Facebook as well, tag the business. Really, that's what we want. So why would we serve an affogato in anything other than this? Okay, this can be very, very easily engineered. Here's some more examples of crockery. Really simple stuff, but again, it's attention grabbing. You almost feel like you're having an experience here. I've got this image here for a very important reason. Some of you, especially the internationals, will probably pick up that this is an Illy coffee cup. Illy's a chain that's very large in Asia and Europe, but it never really took off in Australia. But what they do exceptionally well is the shapes of their cups. And this is their latte glass. It almost looks like a martini glass. What I will say to prospective cafe owners and even established cafe owners is the shape of your crockery will allow a very experienced barista to put exceptional latte art on a coffee. That's not to say that this is exceptional latte art here, but the way this works is as the barista pours the coffee in, the longer they pour, the slower the cup fills, so they can really work on their design. Some cafe owners make the mistake of purchasing crockery that tapers inwards. It kind of closes at the top. And that makes it really difficult for an experienced latte artist to put an amazing design into the cup because it fills up really, really quickly at the end. So also be conscious of the shape of your crockery, especially if you're intending to show off some level of latte art. I really like these pieces here. They look handmade. Just quality. Handmade pottery does appear to be a current trend, but I want you to observe that yourselves. Staff uniforms, make a note of what people are in these market-leading cafes are wearing. What are their staff wearing? Are they brown aprons folded like this just at the waist, or are they full aprons? Are they long aprons? Are they black T-shirts? It's not my place to tell you what these market-leading cafes are having their staff wear by way of uniform, but I do want you to make that observation yourself. Okay, and here are some examples. It's a great place in Byron Bay in Australia. They've got a uniform policy of jeans, a checkered shirt, and a denim apron. And obviously that fits in with the theme of their particular business. Here's the Hessian sack making another appearance. I kind of feel that would be, Hessian can be quite an itchy and abrasive material, so I should hope that that's lined. That was definitely a trend a few years back. I'm not too sure you're going to see that in market-leading cafes at the moment. Here's a two-tone apron. If you can hear me drinking, I apologize. I want you to study the food display cabinets, and this is going to be a great lesson to even the established cafe owners. Go up to the cabinet and if they're as impressive as something like this, ask the staff, say, wow, what an amazing display. Would you mind if I took a photo? They're not going to say no. I guarantee they will not say no. But when you do take a photo like this, you can study how they've engineered this. And I guarantee you, without a photo of an amazing display, you will not be able to emulate it. I've seen people try to do it time and time again, but unless you're copying from a photo, you won't be able to emulate it. You won't know what product is in the display cabinet. You won't know how it's laid out, what it's presented on. You're going to miss all of these very, very fundamental things. So if you want to get it right and you want to emulate success, you're going to have to take some photos. For experienced cafe owners out there, if you're selling a hell of a lot of coffee and you just can't seem to increase your average spend, it may very well be your display cabinet. If you're wondering what sells, go to these market-leading cafes, take a photo, and here you go. You can see what sells. These people are doing relatively well selling these particular items. So I want you to study this very, very carefully. Here's some more examples. Here we've got lunch items, moving across to the sweeter items close to the cash register, and ambient items over the top. I dare say, given where we are in with our experience with COVID-19, ambient displays are going to be heavily frowned upon. So you probably won't see a lot of that when you are studying market-leading cafes. Study the lighting in the displays as well. That's going to be really quite important. This is a farmer's market in the UK. You couldn't get away with that at any time here in Australia. Here you've got a great display of sweets. Again, if you're not sure how to sell sweets, well, take some photos of the market leaders and then get out there and, you know, if you're not a pastry chef yourself, find someone that can potentially supply you with something as extravagant, decadent, and as colorful as this for your display, and see what happens. Counter configuration. I want you to study the counter configuration. There's going to be an amazing education here. Okay. You're going to be able to observe, you know, where is the display cabinet normally settled? Where is the point of sale system? There's a gap here. There's two grinders. So there might be a production printer here. You're going to be able to observe this and write down all of this equipment and their layout while you're observing these cafes. If you notice that they're all kind of set up in the same way, there's probably a very good reason for that. For those experienced amongst listeners right now, you'll know that, you know, we'd have the coffee printer right here. We grind the coffee here. We extract the coffee on the coffee machine. We move across and we steam our milk. And then we pass the coffee off to one side. For those of you that are inexperienced, well, if you study the counter configuration, you're not going to make a mistake here, because the market-leading cafes will set this up more or less the same way every single time. Here's another example where you can actually see the display cabinet right next to the cash register, which helps with impulse buying. Table and seating configuration. I often get people coming to me and saying, Pete, I'm looking to buy a cafe, but I don't know how big the cafe should be and how many tables and chairs I should have in a cafe. Well, after today's webinar, you won't need to ask me that question. If you're studying the top 10 cafes and if you're studying success, you're going to know how many tables and seats are at these market-leading cafes. Okay, so I want you to make a note of that. How are these set up? Okay, do they have bench seating at the windows at all, or would they normally press up tables and put 3 chairs around them? All of these things you're going to observe. Okay, none of this stuff has been done by accident. Okay, make a note of all of that. I want you to make a note of the branding. Okay. Here we've got an example of a cafe logo. And again, I'm not necessarily saying it's a good logo either. I would probably say the current trend for branding isn't quite this right at the moment. Here we can see the design element that accompanies this logo. And here they're brought together. We have the logo and the design element behind it on the cup. Again, I'm not suggesting that market-leading cafes have coffee cups that even look anything like this, but maybe they do. I want you to get out there and see that. I want you to study their branding. Again, I hope I'm not wasting my breath on you when I say I'm not. I don't have anything in this webinar that hasn't been brought up because others have failed in these areas before you. So I want you to take this very seriously. You have to study the branding. Don't go to your best friend and ask for a logo. Don't go to your niece and nephew or your daughter or son because they're very good with a computer. Okay, you need to find out what current market trend branding looks like and emulate that. Okay. So when you're visiting these cafes, take a photo of their branding, and everywhere where you can see it appears. Here we can see that they've got the logo on the top, they've put the design element on the bottom, and the color that's come out of their logo, that green, they've used as a header for their menus. Okay, that's the signage outside. Some more examples of branding. And again, I'm not necessarily advocating that this is currently on trend, but I want you to start thinking about where you can see branding within a business. Okay. Here you can see that design element has even been incorporated up on the walls. This is potentially more on trend. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. I want you to get out there and have a look at what logos look like in the market leading cafes at the moment. My feeling is the current trend for branding and logos is what I call typographic logos, which is just a nice, clean, and sometimes unique font. Don't use the Microsoft or Google fonts if you are considering designing it yourself. You're going to need something a little bit more unique than that. And it's quite easy to find unique fonts if you just jump online and type in free fonts. But let's have a look at this particular branding. Here you can see it's called 5 Point. They've got a design element, which is really quite simple, which is just that 5-point star. And then, interestingly enough, they mention what their business is, cafe and bakery. And this can be really quite important if you're putting signage on the front of your building or you're putting an A-frame sign out on the road to try and attract people. There's no point in having a logo that doesn't tell people what you actually do, especially if you're trying to attract new customers. Here they've got their branding on their coffee cup. Again, it's not necessarily a trend that's prominent in market-leading cafes at the moment, but again, you're going to make that observation yourself. We've got cookie jars. I love to see this. The amount of cafes I go to that are advertising someone else's brand on the cookie jars is out of control. If you're going to put cookie jars on your counter, you might as well put your own branding on those jars, or no branding at all. Here you can see the branding on the baking paper. On the signage, really, really important. A lot of people will handwrite these signs. It's not necessary. You can do better than this. And if you're noticing that market-leading cafes are using very clean, well-branded signage for everything they have in their display cabinet, well, that's a cue for you as well. The coffee. There's no reason why you need to advertise someone else's brand on the coffee that you sell. This is a really, really important thing to consider. You can have a coffee company that supplies you also supplying someone across the road from you. And if that person across the road makes a horrible coffee and both of your cafes are heavily branded with the supplier's brand, well, that tarnishes your reputation and the perception of your coffee. So don't ever be held to ransom by what your competition are doing or by who your supplier is supplying with a very similar coffee. I would encourage you to ask your supplier for unbranded bags and brand your own. Anyone that's got questions about that can certainly email me. I'm happy to answer any questions with regards to that. Here's another example of typographic logos. Silo Cafe, Slate. You can see right down the bottom here, they tell you what they do: coffee, lunch, and breakfast. Market Lane Coffee, you can see a very simple typographic logo. Now, menu design. You don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to menus. I want you to get out there and study what's on the menu at market-leading cafes. Okay, take photos of the menus. If you don't feel comfortable taking a photo, jump on their website. I guarantee their menu is on the website. Now, if you want to be really cheeky, jump on their Instagram page and marry up the photos with the menu items, and then again save those into a folder on your desktop. So now you know what menu items are on their menu and also what they should look like. Okay, really, really important. And certainly if you take this exercise seriously, well, you can really extend this exercise to social media. You can start studying the competitions and the interactions that these cafes have with their followers on social media, the way they present things. Okay, there are true lessons to be had here. Okay, now certainly market-leading cafes have learned the hard way. What are people buying and what aren't they buying? Okay, when you start seeing a trend on these menus, the same items popping up over and over and over again, well, that's your cue to know that if we're going to be dictated to by what the customer wants, it's going to be really, really important that we make these observations and include those on our menu. And I'm quite sure you will see a trend on breakfast and lunch menus. There's no two ways about it. but also study the aesthetics of the menu as well. How the menu is presented. And here are a few examples of presentation for menus. It's really quite important that you do make it easy for your customers to find the breakfast and lunch items, as well as, well, here we've got dinner and wine as well, but where the coffee menu is, where the lunch menu is, where the breakfast menu is, okay? And again, you can see there's a lot of ways to present a menu, but you're going to find out what the market leading cafes are actually doing. I kind of like this. Out of curiosity, you would probably pick up that little piece of wood that's in the middle of the table, and it would present you with the menu. This is an example of a coffee menu. And what they've done here is really quite clever. It's not a new style of coffee menu, but I do like it. They've only got 2 varieties of coffees here, or pricing scales for the 2 coffees, a white coffee and a black coffee, and then they've got the small, medium, and large prices. They've got batch brew, tea, soy, almond, and I can only imagine I can't imagine that's soda water. It's probably soft drink. So, you know, what you've probably learned here is that we need to be dictated to by what the customer wants. We need to start with what the customer wants. What are the customers taking photos of? What are the journalists writing up about? It's one of the hardest things to understand with regards to setting up a new business, because, you know, whether you're running a cafe currently or whether you're looking to start up a cafe, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is to build what you want. Okay, and I see this mistake over and over again, and inevitably people that build what they want fail. It's a really sad thing to see. So following your passion is probably the wrong thing to do with your first business, okay? And it really does get my goat when I hear business coaches saying, follow your passion, follow your passion. Don't follow your passion. No, not with your life savings, not with your first business. Second business, absolutely. You've already made a few mistakes and you've learned from them. But for your first business, I'm going to advocate to you to follow the money, okay? Follow what the customers want. And what is that? Well, you're going to go out there following this webinar and you're going to find out precisely what the customers want, okay? What are the market leading cafes doing, okay? And know with a level of certainty that they're doing what the customer wants. That's why they're market leading. Okay, so I want you to go out and study what the customer wants, and don't make the mistake and fall into the trap of building your dream business, especially if you've never been in the hospitality industry before. For those of you that are seasoned cafe workers, well, look, you're slightly ahead of the rest of us, and certainly experienced cafe operators, absolutely. You can get a little bit more adventurous. But first-time cafe owners who haven't worked in the industry extensively, you need to be very, very careful. One of the biggest challenges we've got is that you don't know what you don't know, and this can be very expensive, okay? In fact, you'll never know what you don't know. There will always be gaps in your knowledge, places where you're absolutely clueless as to your ignorance. We know this. We absolutely know this. And it's for this reason that most cafes fail. It's for this reason that even successful cafe owners have paid a high cost for their knowledge and their success. So here I've got an illustration of perhaps what we know and what we don't know. So here in this first square, this is what we know, okay? The second square is what you know you don't know. And this is perhaps why many of you have logged onto this webinar, because you're curious to know. Even experienced cafe operators are saying, what is it that I don't know? Can I get an edge here? I want to hear what Peter's got to say. And I hope I've delivered to some extent some eye-opening exercises that you can do to find out, well, perhaps I can do better in my business, okay? So this square here represents what we know we don't know. But the biggest problem here is what you don't know, you don't know. This is a real problem, and we need to find a way to learn this. The other big challenge is, you'll notice another little box has popped up here. This is what you know, but what you don't know is what you think you know. A portion of what you think you know is also wrong. And this is perhaps a throwback to the idea that we've got to build what the customer wants, not what we want, okay? So there are 2 ways to find out what you don't know. You can make mistakes and correct as you go. And I've certainly taken this path myself. And can I tell you, that's a bloody expensive education. I often joke that I've had the most expensive education of anyone I know. It's very expensive. It can be lengthy. It can take years to make these mistakes. It can likely lead to immediate failure as well if corrections aren't made. I can honestly say that my journey, if I get to know some of you down the track, I'd be happy to share my journey with you. But I've had pivotal moments within my cafe operating career where things could have gone horribly wrong. And I will be entirely honest with you, a hell of a lot of luck helped me sustain my 12 cafes and help me chisel a path towards success. There have been very pivotal moments that I can honestly put them down to luck, which is a horrible thing to think of retrospectively. But, that was the absolute truth. Some cafe owners don't get that luxury of luck. Luck doesn't go their way and they don't learn from their mistakes. You can learn from others' mistakes, of course. This can be inexpensive and can be very, very quick. So your learning options in this regard, you can work in the industry. And for those of you actively working in the industry now, take note. Unconsciously, you can be learning good or bad things in the industry. Okay. But what I would advocate to any of you that are already working in the industry, I want you to be consciously studying the good now. Okay. So you can... Well, relative to where you're working, if it turns out you're not working at a market-leading cafe, you're definitely going to have to get out of your workplace and go and have a look at what other people are doing. Okay. But if you are working in a place that's relatively successful, you've got an immense education in that cafe. I was recently speaking to someone wanting to take the first steps towards cafe ownership. And I pointed out to them that perhaps they shouldn't leave the cafe they're currently working in just yet. And I suggested the exercise of simply writing down all of the equipment within that cafe that they're working in. And they were blown away by the idea that they had an amazing resource right there in front of them. They could literally count all the items of crockery they had, everything at the front of house, everything at the back of house, and make a purchasing list for their cafe. They could have a look at the menu items, and they could ask for time working in the kitchen to learn how to prepare those items. So those of you that are actively working in cafes, I want you to open your eyes beyond this webinar and ask yourself, what can I learn from my current place of employment? If you're working front of house, offer unpaid work in the kitchen to try and learn what goes on there. If you haven't worked with counting the tills at the end of the day, offer your services. And obviously, your boss is probably going to wonder what's happened, and just say, look, I want to be an all-rounder. I want you to be able to consider me for work in any capacity. So I do want to learn how to do everything here, so that when you do need a staff member, you don't look past me. And certainly we can study success, and this is what I've been advocating throughout. But the challenge when it comes to studying success is you don't know what you don't know. So another consideration for some of you might be structured learning, mentorships and courses. Now, there aren't a lot of those things out there, and this is going to be one thing that I'm going to offer for you today. Now, I want you all to have a pen and paper available, because I'm going to share with you what I share with my coaching clients, and I'm obviously going to offer you some coaching services as well. And you're free to take me up on that if you'd like. But I'm going to give you a list of the things that potentially you don't know, and the things that you may potentially need to put into your business if you're actively running a business. So let's have a look at this. Now, I've put together a personal mentorship. And I've put it together to ensure that new cafe owners learn the important and costly lessons in the following areas. Now, active cafe owners will get a lot from this as well, and you'll see what I'm about here. The mentorship that I've put together is a 12-week mentorship, but I've also made it available online on an online learning platform where I've propagated it with a lot of videos and audio, so you can even listen to it in the car as you're driving, so that you can digest that information at your own speed. Tonight, I'm actually going to offer personal mentorship where I'm going to walk you through every single one of the lessons I'm going to take you through right now. Now, Unit 1, choosing and designing a sensational cafe. This particular unit is what I've shared with you today. So I hope you can appreciate the value of what I've been talking about today. I'm giving this to you for free. And I can honestly say to you, it is the most valuable information I can give you with regards to a very first step into cafe ownership, or into ensuring that your current cafe stays on trend and becomes a market leader. So please take this information seriously. I've given it to you for free. That's my very first unit. My second unit, we talk about developing a business plan. And can I tell you, the first time I had to develop my business plan, I was already 4 cafes in. I went to my banker and asked them for a loan so that I could expand on my business. And my banker asked me to prepare a business plan. And I resented him for it. I hated the idea of business plans. But I did end up developing that business plan because I needed the funding, and the education within that was exceptional. So I could not include that in my mentorship. And, you know, a good business plan can lead to very, very quick expansion of your business. When business opportunities become available to you, you're going to have a marketing document ready and available. And I'll be able to show you how to polish that up nicely so it looks more like a prospectus than a business plan. In Unit 4, we talk about design and layout. And design and layout can either save or cost you a lot of money in labor costs. So I'll walk you through the tips and tricks in designing the layout of your cafe so it's most effective. We've got a whole unit on the pitfalls of negotiating a lease. And this is really, really important. A lot of clients will come to me with troubled businesses, and a big part of the problem with their business is the lease that they've signed. So I share a lot of the pitfalls when it comes to signing leases and how to understand the negotiating process with regards to leasing. So this is a really, really valuable unit. And certainly I share examples of leases that we can dissect as well. I've got a unit on insurance so that you understand what level of insurance you actually need for your cafe, and whether or not you go through an insurance broker or the underwriter directly, and the pros and cons of each. And we run through the most common claims that cafes have in Australia so that you'll know what your not negotiable items of insurance should actually be. I'm going to give you a full purchasing list for everything that I've purchased in some of the cafes that I've built. Now, these are very, very comprehensive. I get right down to even staples and staplers in this list. And it's amazing how much the smaller items build up and add to your initial fit out and building costs for your business. So I'm going to share that list with you, and it's fully propagated with pricing and all the items that you would ever need to build your business. I run through the ins and outs of the different point of sale systems that are available right at this moment, and there's an awful lot out there, and they come in a lot of shapes and sizes, and not one size fits all. So you'll probably find that a certain style of point of sale system will better suit your business, and we work our way through that. I share my I've got a unit on designing your menu and also costing it. We talk about the psychology of menus and how to get customers to purchase certain items. We also look at how to calculate gross profit and set pricing for each and every one of our products. Again, this is a big pitfall for a lot of cafe owners who get caught out by not charging what they should be charging for their items, or in some instances selling things that they probably shouldn't be selling in their cafes. In Unit 10, we look at how to set up our product displays for maximum sales, the tips and tricks of making an attractive display cabinet. And we also, in Unit 11, look at catering. And I noticed, I think it was Deb that was asking a question with regards to COVID-19 and how we would do things differently following this. I can honestly tell you that coaching clients that I've had that have put catering in place well before COVID-19 weren't massively affected by COVID-19. I've actually got a few cafes that I support that have said they actually did better throughout COVID-19 than they ever have. And one of the main reasons for this is they didn't have to build the infrastructure to be able to deliver product to customers or have customers ordering online. That infrastructure was already in place, so they really hit the ground running. Catering is an amazing addition to any cafe business and can massively bolster your turnover. So I share with you how to be able to prepare a catering menu and how to chase catering business in your areas. We talk about how to align yourself with suppliers and, some of the pitfalls that you may encounter with regards to aligning yourself with certain suppliers and taking on board, free equipment or anything that's offered to you for free by suppliers. I also talk about what a true measure of a good supplier actually looks like and how you need to go about finding a half-decent supplier. Excuse me for a moment. Gee, this guy talks a lot. We're almost at 2 hours now. We also look at creating a team of superstars, and I share some unconventional methods of being able to source amazing people and also grow amazing people in your business. So that's an amazing resource. Often when I communicate with cafe or business owners in general, one of their biggest qualms is, I can't find decent staff. As someone that's potentially working in a cafe yourself, you may even agree, my team isn't fantastic. And you know what? Usually it's the employer's fault. But this can be engineered, and it's very important that it is engineered well, because you've heard it before, your staff can make or break you. So I'm going to share with you where to find awesome staff and also how to engineer awesome staff and grow a team of people that can well represent your business. I talk you through setting up an orientation program so that you can train your staff to be able to represent your company the way you want them to. And this is transformational. Honestly, when I put orientation programs into my business, it really changed the way I did business and for the best, and made things a hell of a lot easier. I'm going to share an amazing tool with you. It's called the 10-Minute Manager. This tool it's a managerial tool. It'll help you set up your rosters. It'll help you control your purchasing costs. It'll help you control your labor costs. On a day-to-day basis, it's going to tell you whether or not you made money or lost money. Now, you're going to say, but Pete, doesn't my accounting software do this? No, it doesn't. Your accounting software will only tell you at the end of the month whether or not you've made money or not. And even then, it's not a decent representation of whether or not you've made money or not, because, look, I'll give you an example of a cafe owner that's just opened up in January. They'll open up their cafe in January, run all of January. At the end of January, they'll get their profit and loss statement prepared by their bookkeeper or their accountant. And their bookkeeper and accountant will pat them on the back and say, great work, you made a small profit this month. It wasn't expected, but, keep doing this. Keep doing what you're doing. Come February, exactly the same thing's going to happen. They're going to get a pat on their back. Their profit and loss from their accounting software is going to say they made a profit, and they'll just keep doing what they're doing. Same thing's going to happen in March, but in April, the accountant's going to say, hang on, what's happened? You've made a horrible loss in April. I thought you were doing well. What did you change? And it's interesting that they ask you that question, given that they're an accountant or a bookkeeper. And often they will ask you that question. The answer is you had a lot of expenses that only came in the fourth month. Things like pay-as-you-go, superannuation, work cover, electricity, gas, water. You may have paid your insurance that month. These things weren't accounted for in the previous months. Okay, the 10-minute manager will account for these and tell you on a daily basis whether or not you were overstaffed today and whether or not you need to adjust your roster for tomorrow, or whether or not you've overpurchased or underpurchased. It's an amazing tool, and to the best of my knowledge, it's not available anywhere else, which is why I had to develop it myself. I'll be sharing that with you. In week 11, I show you how to set up your IT requirements to be able to manage your business on the go. I'm someone that was managing 12 cafes simultaneously. So I did put a lot of mechanisms in place to be able to automate my business and to be able to manage it from anywhere. Okay. For those of you that have heard of the 4-hour work week by Tim Ferriss, think of this as the 4-hour work week for the cafe industry. I'm going to share with you a lot of tips and tricks and a hell of a lot of resources that are going to free up your time and help you produce a far more professional product than you ever thought possible. Okay, I'm really excited about that particular unit. In unit 17, I'm going to teach you the ins and outs of documenting policies and procedures. I call this bulletproofing your business. So when things go haywire, you've got the right processes in place, so you're not found negligent as an employer in the eyes of whether it be a tribunal or a court of law. Okay, we need to be really, really careful with this. And a lot of cafe owners do not document their policies and procedures. I'm going to show you how to be able to do that very, very quickly, very, very effectively. And I'm going to blow your mind with how much of an education is available just within your processes and procedures. I'm also going to share a bonus unit with you, which is a tutorial on assessing businesses. So for those of you that are actually looking at purchasing businesses, you're engaging with business brokers, or you're looking up at Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace for businesses for sale, when you do get these sales documents, I'm going to show you how to find, excuse the language, but the BS that's hidden in these. I can categorically tell you that 95% of sales documents for cafes that come across my desk from clients that I'm mentoring are fraudulent. There's garbage in them, absolute garbage. But the great thing is the numbers don't lie. And I'm going to rip apart 2 case studies for you, and I'm going to show you, and it's not difficult, I'm going to show you how to see the lies in these numbers so that no one pulls the wool over your eyes. When you see a business that says it's making $120,000 a year, and you apply some of my techniques to analyze them, you'll see that it's not making $120,000 a year, it's making a loss of $20,000 a year. And perhaps that will change what you're prepared to offer that particular person to take over that business. So that's immensely valuable. The other bonus that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share with you all of my lists and all of the templates that I use to manage my business. So that's a total of 27 indispensable tools and templates that I use in my business. I'm going to give you a business plan template. I'm going to give you a market-leading cafe blueprint. In actual fact, I'm going to share that with you today. Okay, so those of you that have stayed on, and there's a lot of you there, so I'm really excited. In a moment, I'm going to share a downloadable file which has all of the course notes, but also the blueprint that you can print off 10 times and take off to cafes and make the notes that are required. I'm going to give you a polished business plan template, something that you'll be able to transpose your Microsoft Word document onto. I'm going to give you a new location checklist, 20-point checklist of things that you really need to be careful on when you're evaluating a cafe location. Okay, I'm going to give you a full cafe equipment purchasing list, a new business startup checklist, so where you need to start when setting up a business, registering the business name, communicating with your accountant, your bookkeeper, setting up your insurance, training your staff, the whole lot, a step-by-step checklist of what you're going to need to do to open up your cafe. I'm going to give you a turnover requirement calculator. Now, what this will actually allow you to do is when you're looking at a location to lease, it's going to tell you whether or not you can afford to lease that location relative to what they're asking for rent. Okay, so it's one of the biggest problems that new cafe owners have. Can I afford to lease that location? I'm going to show you. I'm going to walk you through the use of this tool and show you how you can establish whether or not you can afford to take on a particular lease at a particular location. I've got a coffee profit calculator. So if you're curious, how much money do we make on coffee? You're going to be able to calculate this on all varieties of coffees that you've got. I'm going to share with you a gross profit calculator, an ideal tool for communicating with sales reps very quickly as to whether or not you want to purchase their product. And you may not want to purchase their product because you don't make any money on it. Okay, so that's a really handy tool to quickly evaluate whether or not it's even worth selling something. I'm going to share with you my food pricing calculator. It'll allow you to cost all of your menu items so that you know very, very quickly and very, very accurately how much you're making on everything, and also whether or not you need to increase the prices or renegotiate with your suppliers. It's also a mechanism to be able to quickly update your pricing when your suppliers update their pricing. Okay, so a really valuable tool, and I put this into play in my businesses every 3 months just to make sure that everything that I sell is still very profitable. I'm going to share with you a preferred supplier contact list, which is going to prompt you to initiate conversations with certain suppliers. So you're going to have to speak with someone that can empty your grease trap every month. You're going to have to potentially engage with a window cleaner. You're potentially going to need someone who sells you coffee or fresh produce. I'm going to outline all of the people that you're going to need to find to be able to support your business. I've got interview questions that you may use for interviewing managers and also general staff, another set of interview questions for general staff. I've got a new employee orientation checklist, the 17 things you need to take your staff through to make sure that they're ready to join your team and that they can start work efficiently and effectively. I'll share with you employee contracts that you can use as templates. Café staff job descriptions, staff orientation packages. Now, my orientation packages go for about 4 hours. I'm going to share with you the orientation package, an orientation package that you can use with your new staff and how to also tailor that to your needs. Staff personal and confidential information templates. I'm going to share with you that 10-minute manager. Okay, so you're going to get that as well. A catering email calculator, which will help you very, very quickly quote for large amounts of catering, because we don't want to spend our whole day quoting on catering. We want to quickly quote and then get back into the business of running our cafe. So I'm going to share with you those tools. Catering order forms, which you can send to your customers so that they can quickly order catering. Also, examples of catering menus. I'm going to share with you a cafe audit report, something that you can run through every 6 months to make sure that, you're not getting complacent with your cafe business. Okay, this was very handy for me running my cafes under management, so I could just make sure everything was being done the way we wanted these things to be done, and we weren't taking anything for granted. Daily cafe opening checklist is really important, and it keeps the closing staff honest. A lot of the hard work, if I'm honest, gets done on the close. We clean, we prep, we put things away. So the daily opening checklist just makes sure that we've got the right procedures in the evening and that everything is getting done the way we want them to be done. Monthly cafe maintenance checklists, a great checklist for basic maintenance on our equipment so that it lasts. Now, I know personally across my 12 cafes, the cafes that undertook in regular maintenance of the equipment saw far less maintenance costs. So I'm going to share that with you, and that's obviously why I've put this in place. Daily temperature monitoring sheets that your staff need to fill out regularly just to ensure that your equipment's working well, and you've got to register that you're monitoring this stuff. So if something untoward does ever happen in your business and you're investigated, well, you've got a level of documentation that shows that you have displayed a duty of care and you've been monitoring the temperature of food. Also, an end-of-day automated till reconciliation tool, which will allow your staff to very quickly count the tills and also establish where things may be unbalanced and have and where we may have had problems arise and how we can rectify these problems. So that's a great tool also. Now, today, I'm also offering 12 hours of my personal coaching and mentorship. So I have the online program, and that online program, you can start at any time, and you can work through that at your own pace, and that's priced at $1,200. But today, I'm actually also going to offer my own personal mentorship, and I'm going to walk you through every single one of those units and share examples of how you can apply them within your business and also help you over some of those speed bumps that you've been encountering. I'll walk you through the course week by week, giving you my own personal stories and experience. The coaching's conducted via Skype at a set time that suits you weekly. This 12 weeks of personal coaching is normally priced at $2,160. Okay. And as a bonus tonight, I'll be taking on 7 subscribers. I can't handle more than 7 mentorship students. So I'm only offering it to 7, the first 7 this evening, personal clients that I can walk through that. So if this sounds like something that you really need and an education that you need, I'll be able to make that available to you. So what I'm offering today is the full 12-week foundational program that's $1,200 in value, okay? And for some of you who want to work at your own pace without a personal mentorship and me there helping you with this, you can pick up this program online, and I'm going to share the link with you shortly, and you can start that training at your own pace at $1,200. But on top of that, I'm offering my own personal coaching, the full template package list, and the 10-minute manager. Immense value. If you were to pay for these individually, it's $4,857. But you're not going to have to pay for that tonight, okay? Today, including my own personal mentorship, having me walk you through the full program, I'm offering it for $1,600. So if you need this education, if you're an active cafe owner who doesn't have a lot of these tools in place, who hasn't considered a lot of this education, who potentially needs someone to bounce off, or if you're a new cafe owner who doesn't know where to start and needs to start putting some of these mechanisms in place before you start making decisions with regards to what you're going to lease and where you're going to lease it, this program is ideal, and it's available today for $1,600. Okay, to get started, I'm going to share a link with you. And you'll probably see this on your side panel, okay? If you click the link that's available in the side panel, you'll be able to purchase this special at $1,600, and I will probably be contacting you in the next couple of days to organise a day and time weekly that works for you for your weekly hourly mentorship sessions, so you can work through that 12-week program at your and make sure that you get the questions answered that you need answered as you work through that program. Now, I'm going to take the time now to work through a Q&A as well. We've got about 30 minutes left in the room. So we're going to have to move on. Some of you have sent me through some questions, which is great. And I'm going to work through those quickly and try and answer as many questions as I can. If I don't get around to some of your questions, rest assured I did receive them via email, and I will answer them individually via email if I don't answer them tonight. So the first question I've got here is, how can I find out the market value of plant and equipment included in an existing cafe to see if it is a reasonable cost? Well, that's actually a really good question. That's from Eric. Eric, you know what? It's really not that difficult. You can, especially nowadays, you're going to laugh. You just jump on Google. If it's a pass-through dishwasher, jump on Google, type in buy pass-through dishwasher, and you'll see some second-hand dishwashers listed there. You can also get second-hand pricing available on places like Facebook Marketplace, and also Gumtree as well. So have a look at these online locations and see what the pricing is. And generally speaking, secondhand equipment will all kind of lay in the same area. The exception to that might possibly be certain coffee machines would be more expensive than others. But for most commercial hospitality equipment, they depreciate very, very quickly. So I would recommend that you jump online and you just make a list of the pricing for all of that secondhand equipment, and you can get back to that cafe owner and say, look, this is what I'm prepared to offer you for this plant and equipment. And more often than not, they'll take you up on it, because the other alternative is listed individually online, and that can be a long-winded process, or get it all auctioned off, and that can be a challenge as well. So we don't want to do that. If you make a half decent and reasonable offer, they'll probably take you up on that. So I hope that answers that question, Eric. Now, next question. I read on your site that generally cafes are priced at 3 to 4 times the yearly profit. Many of the cafes I'm looking at the moment, New South Wales, seem to be priced at 2 times or even below 1.5 times the net profit. Should I be suspicious here, or has the cafe industry changed in the last year? Well, look, you should absolutely be suspicious. Always be suspicious when it comes to the sale of cafes. Now, you probably read one of my earlier articles on the hospitality coach. Look, it's just a guide. The way you really need to look at what you're going to offer a a business owner for the sale of their business is not only how much profit that business is making every month, and be sure that that's a true profit. So you want to make sure that you eliminate the BS in the numbers. Again, always make sure that you have an account and have a look at the profit and losses before you purchase a business. Or if you're working with me, shoot them through to me. I'd be happy to have a look at them and also give you an education in reading those numbers. But if the numbers are where they need to be, you then need to assess how much is left on the lease. So let's say there's a cafe business for sale for $80,000 and it makes $50,000 a year. I'm just making these numbers up. And there's only 1 year left on the lease. Well, would you pay $80,000 for a business that you can only run for 1 year and you may only make $50,000 that year? Well, no, you wouldn't. But if in that same business you knew the lease still had another 6 years left on it, well, yeah, you probably would pay $80,000 because then you know that business will make a profit of $50,000 in the first year, another $50,000 in the second year. So you've got your money back in 2 years, and whatever's left on the lease is return on investment. Okay, so I hope that kind of puts things into perspective for you. So, Jim, that's your question. So, Jim in New South Wales, it is relative to what the true profit is and how much is left on the lease as well. Okay. Next question. In terms of the lease, what do you use as a minimum length? Also, does this include the right of renewal, e.g., a 1 year left but has +3+3? Do you consider this to be 1 year or 7? Well, look, that's a great question. I consider that to be 7 years, and I get this question a lot from new cafe owners. You know, the backstory will be I'm terrified of signing a long lease. What's the minimum length lease that I can ask from a landlord? And I often turn that question around and I'll ask them, look, if you're planning to succeed, you want the longest possible length on a lease as conceivably possible. If you're planning on failing, well, yeah, absolutely, take on a 2 year lease, but it's not going to serve you. If you take on a 2 year lease and you're amazingly successful, well, you don't have a right to occupy after those 2 years. You've built something amazing and you're going to have to move it or close. So my advice there is, you know, what do you use as a minimum length? Well, as much as I can possibly get, if I'm honest. I've had leases that are up to 10 years. So that's what I would recommend. Plan to succeed. Looking to buying an established cafe. Owners started 7 years ago and the husband is very ill, causing them to sell. They have only given 1 year's takings. Although I like the figures, it is not unreasonable to ask for the 3 years takings. The net income is 64,000. I'm assuming that's net profit, 64,000, and they're asking 195,000. That is pricey, yes or no? Well, again, it's pricey relative to how much is left on the lease. If you've only got 1 or 2 more years left on the lease, absolutely, you're not going to get that money back in 2 years. Okay, it's going to take 3 years to get that money back and a few more years to get a return on investment there. So yes, it absolutely is pricey if you don't have the years left on the lease. What else are we asking here? Although, yeah, you should absolutely be asking for more figures. If they've been operating for 7 years and they're only offering you 1 year worth of figures, well, yeah, something not quite right there. Why? What are they hiding? And generally speaking, they will be hiding something. So, yeah, buyer beware in that instance. And, you know, it's a peculiar thing, but often I tell people, trust your gut. You know, if it stinks, it probably stinks for a reason. Now, that's not to say that we may not take on this business, but it may change what you're prepared to offer them. So, again, we want to have a really close forensic look at these numbers and have a look at what the true story here really is. Hi, Pete. Thanks for your time. Just wondering, what is the procedure on doing a trial? How long is reasonable for a trial period? Would you do a trial first, then do a training handover, or do you do both at the same time? Yep, that's a really good question. Well, what's the procedure on doing a trial? Well, you just ask for a trial. Would you be happy with me spending some time in the business before making an offer? That's not unreasonable. And, I've done that with my businesses, and I have no problem at all in allowing people to do a trial. So often I find with my clients, they're met with a lot of resistance with regards to this. And what I'll say to them is, well, if they've got something to hide, you probably need to be careful. And I wouldn't be making them an offer if they're not prepared to give you a trial period. Would you do the trial first, then do the training handover? Well, yes, I would. The training and handover, well, a handover implies that it's being handed over and you've signed a contract of sale. A trial period, well, we haven't made an offer just yet. I want to substantiate the numbers and see truly how busy this business is and what the business operations are like. And look, even if you don't get offered a trial period or it's not available to you, I would recommend that you sit in the cafe for a good part of a week and I share a very specific technique with some of my mentorship students, but count customers, and you can attribute an average spend to those customers, and it's not difficult to substantiate the numbers that someone's suggesting that they're doing in a business just by counting transactions. So look, that brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope you've all enjoyed the presentation. I'll quickly switch back over to my chat panel just to see if I've missed anything. Well, look, we've got another 7 minutes. If anyone has any questions, look, Deb's put something on that I missed a little bit earlier. I own a coffee roastery business and have a cafe attached. Looking for ideas around food proposition, cost of goods, other than exceptional coffee, having a point of difference. Thanks. Deb, you know what? I would probably say, Deb, can you shoot me through an email with that question? And I'm going to get back to that shortly because that's a really good question. And I have had a lot of experience with roastery businesses, so I might be able to offer you some feedback, but it's probably not relevant for the current discussion because it's very roastery centric. Rocco, the language is very important to understand. As well in the course. In Spanish will be great. Rocco, I wish I could present this in Spanish. The best I could do is walk you through it very, very slowly, but it would really depend on your ability to understand the English as well. A lot of my material is written, so you can work through it at your own pace. And also, there's a lot of audio material so that you can listen to it over and over again, and a lot of video material demonstrating the principles that I talk about. So Rocco, it will be, I'm happy to speak to you after this, and you can establish whether or not this is something that would suit you as well. I've got Sammy in sunny Brisbane, and she's been in business for 20 years. Would love some ideas to survive COVID. Sammy, COVID's something that's affected us all. And depending on where your business is, the advice might differ. But the big takeaway from COVID will be to make sure that you're able to communicate openly with your customer base. A lot of cafes did this, from the outset. They set up email lists. They worked on their social media and built a community. That's been the big lesson. If you were able to communicate with your community over the COVID period, you're in a position to be able to offer them a slightly alternative product that worked throughout this period. I mentioned this a little earlier when I discussed cafe owners being ready by way of having infrastructure in place to deliver catering and being able to tailor those catering services to other parts of their business. So that was really a big thing, Sammy. Unfortunately, our time is coming up. My timer has actually stopped for some reason. If there's any questions that I haven't answered, or if you've still got questions that you'd like to have answered, please send me through an email. There will be a replay of this webinar available to you in the next day or so. So I'll send you out an email. So if you want to watch this again, it'll be absolutely available. And again, if you visit the checkout page and book the personal mentorship program, there will be a checkbox to add me to that mentorship. If you don't check that box, you'll only be purchasing the online course. Thank you so much for having me this evening, and thank you so much for staying with me throughout the full 2 hours of this webinar. I look forward to interacting with each of you individually. If you do go on and book today, I'll be in touch with you in the next day to organise a date and time that best suits you for your own personal coaching. Thanks again for joining me. Keep in touch.